Welcome back to the program. This is the third part of your favorite political show, the Sunday edition. My name is Yusuf Ibrahim, of course, once again standing in for Ben Kitili. And we do expect a political rally by NASA, or well known as the NRM now, the National Resistance Movement. They're expected to hold a rally at the Jacaranda grounds right in the capital, Nairobi. The rally is going to be led by one of their principals, Musalia Mudavadi. And their agenda this time round is to roll out their resistance program. This comes just a day after they distanced themselves from the petitions that have been filed at the Supreme Court. And speaking about Mudavadi, I believe yesterday he spoke in Vihiga, where he hinted at a possible referendum in the country to change what he said, of course, the constitution to ensure electoral justice and the formation of the People's Assembly. Let's listen in.
Ambayo iko sasa kwa executive structure, governance structure ya Kenya hii, it is not possible for it to work in this country. Na Wakenya mujitayarishe, tunataka turudi kwa referendum, tutengeneze katiba, kwa sababu tunaona hawa wanataka watumie namba zao za Jubilee kwa parliament kuhadaa wa Kenya. Kwa hivyo the people's power itakuja kwa referendum. Na tunataka wale 70% ambao walikaa nyumbani, musikubali watu wachache watusumbue katika Kenya hii.
And of course, Siaya has already become the first county in the country to debate and pass NASA's motion for People's Assembly. Later on, Busia, Vihiga, and Homa Bay counties followed suit. Those are 4 counties in a possible 19 counties that have been referred to as NASA's stronghold. And they say the 2 elections, the one that was held on August 8th and the other one that was held on October 26th, are null and void. And of course, they're saying they support a referendum. I'm still with our guest here in studio of Dismas Mokua Mutida Kavemba, as well as Hesbon Owila. Dismas, let me begin with you once again. I don't know why I begin with you every time.
Because of my strategic positioning.
Okay, because you are on the right side, I believe. Let me say that. So, what is People's Assembly? What is it all about?
Well, number one, the motions passed by the People's Assembly of the counties you've named, from a legal perspective, they count for 0. It's a waste of time. And those MCAs know that it's a waste of time because it's simply a motion. It will go nowhere. Are they going to forward the same motion to the IBC or to any other body? Of course, it's a waste of time. But from a perception perspective, it works to keep the NASA message glued together. Because you can imagine having 3,000 people in every county discussing the People's Assembly, whether they meet under a mango tree, whether they go to a market and have a conversation. It's very strategic for NASA to have their message, because you have now 3,000 disciples in every county, and it's going to have a multiplier effect. If every disciple decides he's going to look for another 100 guys, then they can spread the message very strong.
When you're saying 3,000 people in every county, you mean all the 47 counties, or just the areas known as NASA's stronghold?
My understanding of the People's Assembly, having gone through their talking points with a lot of interest, is that they want to have a People's Assembly in every county. The 47 counties,
yes,
made up of 3,000 people. And that should worry Jubilee, because when you have 3,000 people discussing the same message day in, day out, that is a source of concern. And it keeps the NASA supporters glued together and very happy with Raila Odinga. And they've said it's going to culminate to a People's Assembly now in Nairobi. So when you have these people coming from all the counties coming to Nairobi to discuss the same message, if you are in Jubilee, you should be a very worried man. And if you're not very careful as a nation and contain those People's Assembly, Raila Odinga is planting a seed which may easily create fundamental changes in Kenya. So probably it's a good idea for President Kenyatta and for Raila Odinga to have a structured conversation through a certain legal framework and agree on how to restructure our electoral laws so that we don't go through all these shenanigans, through all these mischief. Because believe you me, at the end of the day, President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga will still have a conversation in a round table and sort out the electoral injustices. So instead of us wasting time going through the People's Assembly, going through around small circles, backpedaling, moving forward, wasting a lot of time, creating tension in the country, why can't these 2 leaders have a conversation in a structured manner and, they engage within the confines of the law and agree on how to make progress?
Of course, Jubilee,
right now, Jubilee
are on record already saying that they'll have a conversation or dialogue, but that will only happen after the president is sworn in. Now,
wait a minute. It's not a Jubilee. Those are leaders.
Yes.
If President Kenyatta today addresses the nation from State House at 5 o'clock, and he says, I'm inviting Raila Odinga for a conversation, and these are the parameters, these are the terms of engagement. Those three leaders you saw thumping their chest will be the first people to say that President Kenyatta's speech is a sign of wisdom. This is how we need to make progress. So forget about these sycophants around Raila Odinga. Forget about the sycophants around President Kenyatta. Yesterday, at the funeral of Bishop Korir, the president made a very powerful speech. He said he's a nationalist, and he's going to use all his powers to ensure that Kenya is stable, that we enjoy peace. And they said Father Korir, or rather Bishop Korir, is celebrated as a peacemaker. Now, if they respect Korir, let President Kenyatta call Raila Odinga for a conversation. Of course, the terms of engagement are agreed. Because you see, as it is right now, Yusuf, we are held hostage by two leaders in Kenya. The word is almost as good as law. So the earlier they have a conversation, a structured one, the better for the nation.
Kavemba, it seems NASA is using all available means to pressure the government. Do you think there is some point or a certain situation where Jubilee is going to cave into these demands being raised by NRM?
You know, the most important thing to note is that NASA is trying to get out of the Constitution to look for a solution. Yet, we all have a duty to defend this Constitution. Like I said, it was not imposed on us. If you look at Article 185 of the Constitution, it talks about the legislative authority of the county assemblies. If you go to Section 8 of the County Government Act, it talks of the roles of the county assembly. If you look at all that, you will see nowhere where they have a basis to call for whatever they are calling for.
But this was alluded to the fact.
Exactly, said it's useless. First I want to make that very clear, that it has no basis in law. It is just pursuing a disruptive agenda and outside the framework of the Constitution. Because what county assemblies can do and what they can't do, again, is clearly provided for in law. And the things they are purporting to do, including invalidating elections, is really not their job. That is the job of another institution called the judiciary, which is addressed by the Supreme Court. You've seen some of the motions they are passing are almost giving judgment to, you know, invalidating the election. Where did they get that mandate to invalidate the election? Yet we have a judiciary that is functional, that has actually done things that have not been done elsewhere in Africa. Like I said, we do not have any reason to go outside this Constitution. Why am I saying that? Because so far it has been serving us. It has served us well, because no one initially would imagine of a scenario where the Supreme Court nullifies a presidential election where a winner has already been declared. So why is it that we are now denying the same institutions that we created a chance to test them? Because when they last tested, and it was NASA that did that, it gave a ruling in their favor. At what point did they decide that it was no longer convenient to pursue whatever they are pursuing within the existing constitutional and legal framework? You know, the good thing about our Constitution is that it also has inbuilt mechanism for us to sort out whatever challenges that are coming. So the big question is, because the People's Assembly is a continuation of trying to get solutions outside our constitutional framework.
Hesbon, I see you listening very keenly to what Kavemba is saying. According to him, the People's Assembly is an exercise in futility.
Well, you might perceive it as an exercise in futility because we don't understand the end game. If the end game is to nullify the elections, then it is an exercise in futility. If the end game is to bring down President Uhuru Kenyatta's victory, again, it's an exercise in futility because that is the prerogative of the Supreme Court. But again, to say that it is outside the Constitution, I think, is to overstretch and to interpret the Constitution the way we want, because Article 1 of the Constitution is very clear, you know, that the sovereign power lies with the people, and it stipulates how this sovereign power can be exercised, and in what assemblies it can be exercised. So there is the legislative arm, there is the executive and the judiciary. Now, the county assemblies are part of the legislative arm, and the Constitution is also very clear in Article 1, sub-Article 4, that this power can be exercised both at the national and at the county level. So if NASA is exercising that at the county level, it is within the frameworks of the law that if these county assemblies are going to push a motion to constitute county assemblies to discuss issues, they are right within the law and you cannot fault them. The issue is, what are they discussing? So it is a question of the discussions and the conversations that they are going to have might not lead to what is constitutional. But just as NASA has come out and say that for them, it is a question of civil disobedience. So if you're going to do it within the law at the county level and just ensure that all over the world and in Kenya, people understand that there is a government that is not recognized in certain quarters of this country, and it is within the frameworks of the law that there are county assemblies, that the people's assemblies that have been constituted just to address issues. And I want to agree with Dismas that when you have that kind of traction and that kind of narrative, you stand a very good chance to sustain this civil disobedience and actually call the establishment into looking at issues. But to say that we are not in a crisis, at least, is to look at crisis as something really, really big. And if we want to look at crisis as something really, really big, then we do nothing. Then we can experience something that is really big. But I want to believe that there's a crisis that is building up. Because if we don't address some of these electoral issues now, what we are saying is that in every 5 years, you're going to have issues. And I don't think Kenyans are interested in that kind of circle. And it's the more reason why we don't need to listen to sycophants and overzealous supporters who are trying to, win anything that they can win within the shortest time possible. We just need to get direction from the principles that what is the way forward. President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga.
Well said, Hezbollah. And
I think it's important first to be clear that no one is saying that there are no issues to be discussed. The question is, how should they be discussed? That is the debate here. It's not that there are no issues to be discussed, but the question, and that's why everyone is clear. Even you've put a clip here for Jubilee leader saying that after we conclude this electoral process, which is going to be at the end of the determination by the Supreme Court, then we are going to discuss. So no one is saying that we shouldn't discuss. But this issue of that we should suspend the electoral process that took place on the 26th, that we should discuss when there is no substantive
I thought that was supposed to be part of the discussion because the people were saying there's no kind of a healthy, electoral system in the country. Now, Dismas, very quickly, because we're almost out of time, NASA is not yet party to the petition filed at the Supreme Court. So do you think they're banking on this sort of civil disobedience? I mean, People's Assembly. And do you think this can bring some sort of change they're looking for from the government?
Well, there are two issues. NASA respondents to the Njojo Mue petition and to the Muri petition. So it means that the NASA lawyers would have the opportunity of making presentations. Because you recall that the NASA leadership has been accused of many errors of commission and commission. So they're part and parcel of that petition. And another interesting case within
But they're not going to take a central position as opposed to the other petition, right?
Yeah, they may not take a central position. But again, you know that the NASA lawyers, for some reason, they're being described as of the intellectual infrastructure, that it's very heavy. So they may be able to tilt the thinking of the Supreme Court in a particular way. But an interesting petition at the Supreme Court is from a Jubilee legislator. His name is Sokin, who wants the Supreme Court to validate the election of President Kenyatta. That one is very curious because IBC has declared who the winner is, yet you have an MP from Jubilee going to the Supreme Court to say that we want you to validate this election. Again, that's opening a Pandora's box. But the acts of civil disobedience that the NASA is talking about, they've got the success rate is very high all over the world. If you go to the Middle East, you remember how in Tunisia they began their revolution. That there was a fellow who was selling tomatoes across the road, and the local authorities gave him a beating, and he started a revolution. Several weeks later, the president had gone. The same happened in Egypt with Hosni Mubarak. So, as a civilized nation, and as a country with a very strong constitution like the one we have today, when you have one opposition leader or one national leader organizing the People's Assembly, it would be very naive for you to ignore that. And I'd like to agree with the words of Kavemba, that these guys could be having a disruptive agenda. But nothing good in this world comes if you don't have a disruptive agenda. Like, for instance, the creation of mobile telephony, the creation of computers by Bill Gates and softwares, it was a disruptive agenda. So if there's anybody in Kenya with a disruptive agenda, which works for the cumulative interests of Kenyans, please bring it forth to the table, provided it's anchored within the Constitution. And everything that NASA is suggesting, as well as Jubilee, if you just get those two leaders, President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, in the absence of their sycophants, to agree on a way forward, we'll do it. And we better do it today. Because at the end of the day, we'll go through small circles, and still at the end of the day, the two will be forced to talk. So they rather talk now over a cup of tea instead of talking in very strange circumstances.
Yes.
And the reason why you need to keep away the sycophants, as Esmond has indicated, There are a number of people who are very close to President Kenyatta today, and if they know that President Kenyatta accepts to creation of an interim government or a caretaker administration, they'll stop enjoying these taxpayer benefits. They'll no longer be cabinet secretaries. They'll not be flying at the cost of the taxpayer. So again, we need to look at the selfish interests of these people when they're advising Raila Odinga. Are they advising Raila Odinga because they love Kenya? Are they advising President Kenyatta because they love Kenya, or do they want to maintain status quo? Believe you me, I know a number of cabinet secretaries who are happy with the current situation because they know for a fact the president cannot fire them, the president cannot appoint a new cabinet.
Still stay in office.
Selfish interest,
let's
look at their selfish interest.
No, Kavemba,
it is important
as you react to that, there's some Jubilee strategists who are saying with all this development within NRM reporters. Okay, I'm saying there are Jubilee strategists out there.
Sensitive to that.
And you'll tell us anyway, let me not put you on the spotlight. Now, there are Jubilee strategists out there who are saying that this is some sort of a exit strategy. Raila is trying to find some sort of an exit strategy, getting out of, Kenya's political arena honorably. So that's why he's calling for the People's Assembly. That is why he's calling for civil obedience. What do you make out of that?
What I can authoritatively say is that Honorable Raila realized that the constitutional framework that is in existence might not give him the kind of the kind of outcome that he would want, and for that reason he decided to play outside, to go extra constitutional. That much I can say. What he wants to achieve is time will tell. But part of it is, of course, being in government, and he has now come out clearly to say that. And what needs to come out clearly to Kenyans so that we don't mislead them is that as the constitution currently exists, there is no room for creation of an interim government. That is very important. So that as they push for that, then they should first, I think Mudavadi has probably come out more clearly than any of them, that there needs to be some constitutional changes. Because that is the only way that we can anchor an interim government in the current constitutional dispensation without breaking the law. Because I've told you, anybody would go to court and would have that kind of government declared unlawful. Because there is an express constitutional provision stating that any other government formed outside what is provided for in this constitution is unlawful. So why would want people, when you push for this, it gets to a point that the common mwananchi who's probably not taken time to go to the constitution think that it is actually possible within the law to have this. It is not, as the constitution is currently structured. There is no room for any other government other than a government that has been put in place through an electoral process. So that's why I'm saying, when people are pushing for that, let them first be very clear that we are pushing for a constitutional amendment to create room for the creation of an interim or caretaker or whatever other government they are naming. Because those are not governments that are envisioned anywhere in our current constitutional framework. Because as a country, we have to choose whether we want to follow the constitution or we want to be operating under the whims of individuals, however powerful they are. Because at the end of the day, we are all subject to this constitution. When we start creating provisions that allow for certain very powerful individuals to, at times and at their convenience, take us outside a constitution. This is not the Lancaster Constitution. This is a constitution that we voted for in 2010 when we all knew what we were doing.
And it seems we're heading to yet another. It seems we are heading to yet another referendum. And there's no problem with that because the constitution itself provides for how to do that. There is no problem with that. That's why I told you that is a debate I can engage in. But the debate of trying to create a picture that we can have any other government other than a government that has been put in place through the electoral process is really a question that we need to be clear that it is not possible under the current constitutional dispensation. I'll come to you shortly. Hezbon, there are those who are predicting, saying that once NASA leader Raila Odinga comes back into the country on Thursday, the first agenda on his entry will be a referendum. And if you've seen the body language, but actually they've said it verbally through Musalia Mudavadi that NASA is, seeing a situation where they're going to come up with a referendum. You've seen the civil disobedience they're talking about, the People's Assembly that they're talking about. So are you foreseeing a situation where the country is going to head to a referendum?
I think NASA is at liberty to do whatever they want to do in their multi-pronged approach. And I want to believe that that is just one way. Because it is not in the foreseeable future that I'm seeing a situation where you're going to have a referendum. And I think they're missing the point. If the issue is electoral reforms and they want to spread themselves thin, then they'll come out like, you know, a group that is complaining about the Constitution when they are disadvantaged by what the Constitution speaks about. And I think that is what Kavemba is talking about, that you cannot be complaining about the Constitution outside the Constitution. And I like the way Kavemba is passionate about constitutionalism, and I also want to believe that his passion is sometimes taking him to a situation where he's fighting shadows, because I don't think NASA in any way has said that they want an interim government outside the Constitution. What they are calling for is dialogue that would provide for a process that will ensure that we have an interim government that will sort out these issues. But they're also running away with other conversations that are pushing the establishment into listening to their cause. But most importantly, I think Kenyans need to understand that some of these things that the civil society folks in NASA and Jubilee are pushing should be looked at in terms of to what extent do they serve the interest of the public? To what extent are they making our life better? So we need to divorce the whole thing from the idea of President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. In as much as we call for leadership among these two leaders, I don't think it's so much about them as it is about what we'll have post their leadership, what the processes would be post their leadership. And I think if you look at some of the undertones that we are having, there is a big section of this country that is not happy with our electoral system. And the reason why they are not happy is because there is another section that is perceived to be influencing the independence of our electoral body and to that extent influencing our electoral processes. And I think if we focus our conversation on that and just say that if you're going to have electoral reforms, let us deal with electoral reforms so much so that if somebody is vying in 2037, that person has a clear system that will be free, fair, credible, verifiable, and transparent. And if we divorce ourselves from looking at it in terms of President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, we can focus on those issues without being emotional.
The issues Hezbollah is raising about actually is saying that people should, separate themselves from this. It shouldn't be an emotional thing. So how can it be best achieved? Through an interim government, through dialogue? I mean, what options are there?
We've said times above number that Kenya is not about Raila Odinga and President Kenyatta. It's about our selfish economic interest. For a good part of this year, the nation has come to a standstill. If you have a conversation with anybody in the middle class, they'll tell you they're having a nightmare paying bills. If you visit any auctioneer's yard, it's full of cars. In fact, auctioneers are no longer taking any cars. They have no space. All this is happening because of the economic situation and because we are held hostage by politicians. So the earlier we realized that we need to jump out of this space where we are held hostage by two personalities.
Are you sure it doesn't have anything to do with the economic boycott?
Well, I mean, the economic boycott started a day ago. The ads have been full for the last 6 months. But again, going back to Kavemba, if the president, if the Supreme Court does not nullify the election and Kenyatta is sworn in, it can create an environment for a caretaker administration by asking his deputy on the same day to resign. So if the president resigns and the deputy president resigns, then you have the Speaker of the National Assembly taking over. And then the Speaker of the National Assembly now can be given a mandate to organize a free and fair election. So all these things, the general framework is actually at play. All you need to do is to have a few clever lawyers sit in a room and work out on the details. And there is nothing, we must not be lied upon that going for another election is going to be expensive, that is going to create another crisis. We better sort out our mess today so that in future, we have election like Israeli. Most of these are parliamentary democracies. When they go to the ballot in the morning, they cast their votes. A few hours later, business as usual. A few days ago, there was an election in Germany. People went and cast their ballots in the morning. The afternoon, they went to watch a marathon.
You wouldn't even realize there was an election in the first place.
We need that kind of a thing. I mean, right now, Kenya, when you're having an election, it's a military operation. You see policemen all over. You see game wardens all over. It's as if now Kenyans have become like animals at the park. You need wardens to guide you now to do these things. Why can't we clean this mess once and for all?
Dismas, I think you've delivered your point very clearly. Kavemba, we're almost out of time, but we'll come back. We still have 30 minutes more. I'll come back to you. But for now, we're going to take a very short break. But of course, the conversation will continue right here on the Sunday edition on KTN News. When we come back, we'll talk a bit more on, of course, the political situation in the country. That those who've been propagating for separation We're going to talk about that in detail, as well as the economic boycott by NRM, what Jubilee has described as an economic sabotage. I'm going to discuss that and much more within this program. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Don't go too far.